Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson. What an honor to have with us, and always great to get him when we can, because he's a busy guy, and we honor and appreciate and value his time. Jordan Sekulow is with us. He is Executive Director of the American Center for Law and Justice, one of the great organizations. You can go to ACLJ.org. That website is unbelievable. One of the great resources of our day. Support what they do, and they are on top of it. Hi, Jordan. Good to see you, bud.
Hey, Perry. Thanks for having me, Perry.
Happy New Year.
You too.
Well, have you caught any of the hearings this morning?
Absolutely. Our good friend Jeff Sessions is testifying right now before the committee of which he served until very recently, the Senate Judiciary Committee, as he prepares to become the next Attorney General of the United States. As we've seen, I mean, so far, the discussion is pretty what we expect, I'd say. You hear, obviously, Republican members basically talking about what they'd like to see different at the Department of Justice. And I know Senator Sessions, soon to be Attorney General Sessions, agrees with them that the Department of Justice needs to be more responsive to the Congress when they request information, that there needs to be reform made. And I'll tell you, Perry, a few days after it was announced that he would be the Attorney General pick by Donald Trump, I was up in Washington, D.C. My dad and I flew up because Senator Sessions has been a good friend of ours for a long time, and goes back to even the relationship goes back to before he was in the United States Senate. Wow. When he was Attorney General in Alabama and a U.S. Attorney in Alabama, and spent time with him privately. And I will tell you, it is, of all the cabinet choices for the work that we do at the ACLJ, and I don't want to take away from defense, which is so important, obviously, and our foreign affairs of the State Department, but I'd say that for the work that we do and to see the reform that we believe needs to happen in the United States in our legal system, and when it comes to law enforcement, remember the DOJ oversees, Senator Sessions will be overseeing the FBI. They work for the Department of Justice. That it's probably the pick that is most exciting. Obviously, there will be some controversy here, but I expect everything to go pretty smoothly. We've got our team in Washington. I've got people in the room. We've got a war room going on in our office, so we're ready to go.
This is fun to watch. I think one of the opening questions this morning was very, very telling, and that's when he was asked about the Clinton emails and the Clinton Foundation. You knew that was a setup question, but at the same token, the way he handled that tells me that he's not going to comment on a case that's still open.
No, he's not, and he's not. There are certain cases because of his time in the U.S. Senate, obviously, where he will have his deputies overseeing that instead. That's a nice change from what we've seen in the Department of Justice, where we had Loretta Lynch. She's now said that was a bad idea when she was meeting on the airplane with Bill Clinton during while Hillary Clinton was under investigation by the FBI, which is overseen by the Department of Justice. And the DOJ ultimately makes the decisions about whether to prosecute. The FBI does the fact finding and the information gathering, if you will. And so this will be a change. I think that for a lot of people on both sides of the aisle, they're going to see a Department of Justice that ultimately, I say this for all the nominees, Perry, because people really want to, drain the swamp, change things. You've got to give them time. These are massive federal agencies that are, you're not going to be able to totally reform in a day. I'd say, give them people like Senator Sessions a couple of years to really fully reform. Now, there's some things that need to be changed immediately, and they can do that. But I'm talking about really changing the culture, because President Obama spent 8 years where it was very tough to determine the difference, Perry, between who were the political appointees, who worked, who was appointed by the president, and who were the bureaucrats that are civil servants that continue on and work. They were kind of in lockstep. I'll tell you, I spent some time at the Department of Justice early on as a kid, actually in college, and then twice, actually 2 different times. And I remember distinctly the way that the bureaucrats and what we were working on at the time in judicial nominees. You didn't really go to bureaucrats to get with any information that could be that needs to be confidential. I mean, they are the leaks. They also will try to undermine, especially conservatives. So it will be a shock to them, and I think that's a good thing.
Do you think, Jordan, that the Republicans on the Judiciary Committee will hold tight and go ahead and give him a good vote up?
Yes, I think that you're going to see. I don't know if there'll be any Democrats that cross over or not. That remains to be seen. Senator Sessions is a friend. He's been in of all these senators. He's been in the Senate a long time. There will be definitely votes against him. But what he's been able to do most importantly, Perry, is I think he's brought together some of the more conservative members of the Senate, he being one of those, and the moderate Republicans, people like Senator Collins, who from Maine, who is out of step on a lot of issues we're concerned about, and disagrees with Senator Sessions on many important issues, but knows that he will run the Department of Justice correctly. I think the way we say it is that title, Attorney General, has two important meanings. You have to be obviously a great attorney, but you have to, in a sense, be a general. You are running all of the prosecutors in the federal government, and we're talking about major criminal activity, terrorism. It of course involves national security, involves domestic security with the FBI, and to have someone like Senator Sessions there, I think it's going to restore a lot of a hope in our law enforcement agencies, especially at the federal level, and on issues where we've seen disturbances, we've seen police, and we've seen protest movements, and there are times when maybe police have acted inappropriately, and other times where it's more of a political message. That with someone like Senator Sessions, if there are problems with access to voting or police misconduct, you better believe it's going to be investigated, but it's not going to be politicized to the extent that it was under the Obama administration. I think, starting with Eric Holder, ending with Loretta Lynch, these were political spokespeople for the president who were really carrying his waters, very different than we've seen from attorney generals in the past. And I expect you're going to see Senator Sessions in these confirmation hearings today. You'll hear the witnesses tomorrow, Perry. But honestly, I think once he becomes attorney general and everybody's focusing on different issues, he will not be like an Eric Holder. He will be in the spotlight when necessary, when it's important, but he's not going to just be carrying the President-elect Trump's every policy and political decision. He's not going to be out there as a champion. He's going to be taking his job seriously as a reformer for the Department of Justice. Obviously, he was an early supporter. He saw before many people the significance, the ability for Donald Trump to organize folks, to encourage people, and he was the first senator to endorse him. And I honestly believe, though, that even if he hadn't endorsed Donald Trump, this was someone that we're so excited about to see. I mean, it's going to be a big change for us in a positive way. Let me explain to people quickly, Perry, the difference. Under the Obama administration, we were fighting the Department of Justice. So when you sued the U.S. government, or the U.S. government came into a case, we were always opposed to each other. In this situation now, when we have a case, there will be times when we can request, and sometimes they'll be able to, the Department of Justice will join our side. And in other instances, we'll be joining the side of the Department of Justice. So it is a big change, I think, for all of us conservatives out there, that we have to now get used to the sense of governing once again, positive, proactive steps that we take, because we've been on the defensive for the last 8 years. I mean, that's just the truth. Yeah, very interesting, especially coming from you and your father and your organization. Let me ask you this, Jordan. Do you think Comey stays or goes? You know, it's an interesting spot. He is not. He could be kind of forced out, if you will, but that would take probably more congressional action, which could come. I think that honestly, both Republicans and Democrats have expressed their dismay in the way he handled Hillary Clinton's situation. Honestly, I mean, I think from the very get-go, this investigation was just phony and all over the place and bizarre, and people were getting it was just not right, and we all saw that. And whether or not you're on the left or the right, it ended up being a very politicized FBI at the very end of our general election, which I don't think anybody wanted to see. Or whether they were closing and opening investigations and reclosing them again. I do believe Jim Comey should go, and many others, that his deputies should go. But that really has to be his decision, or Congress forcing him out. The president can't just go in and clear. You know, they don't serve. They are appointed by the president, the FBI director, for 10-year terms, but they do not. They do not serve at the pleasure of the president like other political appointees. Someone like Senator Sessions, who will be attorney general, if President-elect Trump, when he's president, decides he'd like someone else that position, that's his decision. no one can question that. I mean, you can't stop that. And it's not up to the attorney general at that time either. But when it comes to the FBI director, obviously you have that situation.
One more question, and then we'll move on to some others. Is the Clinton case done? I mean, if the president pardons her, is it all over? Or if he doesn't pardon her, what happens? Where are we with that whole mess?
Sure. I think that it'll be what we have to watch for is who gets pardons. Is it Hillary Clinton or is it all of the deputies? I think that because they were really the weakest links, if you will, in these prosecutions. We know some of them got immunity deals, but some of those were limited to the server issue and the email issue. The Clinton Foundation issue is something totally separate that the FBI has requested more resources on. So that will be up to the next Department of Justice. And I do think what you'll see is either President Obama will kind of put this to rest with pardons. I mean, so that the investigations would not be worthwhile because they could not lead to prosecutions. He could do that. I kind of expect that. I think that if that does not happen, what you'll see is the FBI allowed to do its job, which means that if you're investigating the Clinton Foundation, that's probably working with the national office, but also with the regional offices, like in New York, in the Northeast region for the FBI, and just letting them put their documentation, their research together, then bringing it to the Department of Justice, appropriate attorneys to make the decision about whether there's enough evidence to criminally prosecute. We're talking about criminal matters here. Is there enough evidence to criminally prosecute? So I think that those investigations would continue if those pardons aren't given.
Interesting. All right, let me take a break.
That's not up to, that will not be up to, there's nothing President Trump or Senator Sessions, the Attorney General, they can't reverse those once they're given.
All right. Let me take a quick break here, Jordan. Jordan Sekulow is with us, Executive Director of the American Center for Law and Justice. And you can go to ACLJ.org. It's a great website. It's full of incredible resources, and support what they do. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.
I'm Paulina Leiser, producer of Focus Today. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to check our other videos at theDove.us.
Welcome back to Focus Today, and what an honor to have back with us today Jordan Sekulow. He's the Executive Director of the American Center for Law and Justice. He and his dad had this organization up. They do a wonderful job. They are our watchdogs, and you can go to ACLJ.org and get so much information from that website. It's an incredible resource, and support what they do. They are a faith-based organization. They are our hawks looking over the big scene here, and I can't recommend it highly enough. All right, Jordan, here's an interesting question. Is it unconstitutional for incoming President Trump to use an executive order to undo an unconstitutional executive order?
Absolutely not. So there is a role for executive orders and actions, and obviously to undo executive orders, even ones that may be appropriate, but you disagree with this president. I mean, this is your prerogative. You have to, of course, undo that correctly. Now, what President Obama did, interestingly enough, Perry, was some obviously can be undone that easily. They are just pure executive orders that can, and you just pull those back. I mean, that's it. You just have to issue a directive saying this executive order is no longer good, and again, that's gone. You withdraw that executive order. You don't have to replace it with something. You don't have to come up with new policy to replace it. You just withdraw that, and that's one way. But a lot of what President Obama did were agency directives and regulations that went through rulemaking processes, or like on the immigration actions, those were not traditional executive orders. They were what we called executive actions, where he had department heads, so cabinet members that primarily it was Department of Homeland Security, because they oversee ICE and the immigration services now, that they issued those new way that the deferred action programs would work. And so President-elect Trump would have to have his new DHS secretary, which General Kelly, whose confirmation hearings are also this week, would be able to issue a new directive saying, that has been withdrawn. That's it. We've been fighting those in federal court. The Obama administration has had a very difficult time defending them, and because of that, these again, are all things you can really get done on day 1 through 10, I'd say, where not just undoing it, but also making sure that it's, the message is loud and clear. All of this takes filter down, especially when you're talking about deferred action programs, the immigration changes that were made by the president by executive action. And, those are just some of the high profile ones. There's thousands of regulations that were done this way, changes that were made, through HHS and all these different government programs. And you better believe that Trump transition team has been focused on that and is ready to go. I think it all speaks to the idea of the changes he wants to make, Perry, that Donald Trump has decided, which is unusual, but I get it, to have all of the diplomats recalled by his swearing in on January 20th.
That's big, yeah.
It's a bold move, but here's why it's important. That also then includes people that are diplomats to the UN who have been implementing this horrible anti-Israel policies of the Obama administration, the final days of this administration. They will also not have their positions, and we'll be able to replace those. We already know who our top. It's Governor Nikki Haley from South Carolina, who's been chosen to be the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, and then the other spots will fill in from there. And there's obviously hundreds of these positions because there's many countries, hundreds of countries around the world, and 190 plus countries now, and they will all, for the most part, most of those will need ambassadors. And I think he just wants to change the culture. I keep coming back to that.
Yeah,
I think that's what drain the swamp means. It's change the culture. And it's not just Washington, D.C. These are all of these bureaucratic offices are extensions of Washington, D.C. And I think what he's saying is, listen, we're not going to keep people around who are implementing the foreign policy, whether they were bureaucrats who made it to the level of ambassador or they were, chosen by the president outside of the foreign policy and State Department world to become Foreign Service world, to become ambassadors, that we're going to change the culture across the board when it comes to foreign policy and domestic policy.
So many interesting things. Israel, just for a moment, of course, we're all stunned by what happened through the Security Council there at the UN. I don't know what can be done to unwind that, if anything. However, there is clear indication now that President Trump will move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. That makes a huge statement, but pragmatically, can it be done?
It can be done. The land is there, the space is there, so it can be done in order to be done very quickly. And it makes sense. Israel's government is not based in Tel Aviv, whether the world likes that or not. Israel's government, their Knesset, where their prime minister's offices and residence is in Jerusalem. Now, it's not a huge country, so obviously it's the significant. So the travel time is not all of it, but though it is important if you want to have this new strong relationship that your ambassador is not an hour and a half to 2 hours away.
Right.
All the time, and without traffic, and these are it's a busy spot between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, as you can imagine. But second, with all the violence in that region of the world, and we just saw the terror attack there with the bus attack. I will say that I believe that the UN resolution, which the U.S. let move forward, this resolution 2334 at the Security Council, Perry, has encouraged these terrorists. That's why they're carrying out the attacks against Israel once again. Remember, things had quieted down in Israel. The real conflict was happening in Syria, in Iraq, and even the groups that usually were going after Israel, like Hezbollah, they've been fighting in Syria on the side of the Assad government against ISIS and some of the rebels, because along with Iran. But on the issue specifically, when it comes to Israel now, we're seeing this uptick. And it's because I don't like to say justification, but these terror groups who believe that they are legitimate resistance movements can now point to a UN resolution that says, see, we're fighting against an occupying force who's illegally occupying our territory. So we have we can legitimately target them.
So can Trump put pressure on the UN to maybe change that resolution? Say, hey, look, we're going to defund you guys. Get out of town. He could do something, couldn't he?
It's the financial pressure, Perry. It goes to the U.S. just on the top. The regular budget for the UN, we provide about a quarter, 22%. But that is actually a small part. That's hundreds of millions of dollars. But I think it just in the last time the State Department reported it, which I believe was 2014, we gave discretionary $10 billion over to the United Nations.
Right.
So we not only do we provide 22% of the budget, which doesn't include the peacekeeping that we fund, it also we have this billions in discretionary funds. I don't think you'd even have to say we're going to defund the entire UN to have them be in real trouble. And so yes, financially is how you'd have to target it. Again, Perry, these are bold moves. And people are going to have to, I think that the people that helped get Donald Trump elected and the American people who support Israel, who understand the absurdities going on there, have got to stand with Donald Trump if he decides to take that kind of action, because the criticism from in our country and the criticism around the world will be very high. And so these are measures which we will have to stand strong. We support, and listen, we're a group, our European office is recognized by the UN. We don't support pulling out. I think that the US has this unbelievable power at the UN to make sure bad things don't go on with that veto power. The Obama administration failed to flex our muscle there. And so we need to flex it. We need to be the US again and say, you rely so much on us, world. If you want to continue to do that, here's what we want, and really put their feet to the fire.
One last question. It's been said that President Trump may even take some action right at the podium during his inauguration. What would you like to see him do in the first 100 hours?
Well, the first thing I'd like to do is put in place once again, which you see this happen, but I want to make sure it's on his team, the Mexico City policy, which makes sure that there is no federal funding to overseas abortion groups. That's an executive order, and President Obama, of course, repealed that one. And President-elect Trump can, the moment he takes the oath, these are documents that can be ready on his desk and policies in place. And so that is very key. I also believe that we talked about all the executive orders. That needs to be in those first 100 days. That is plenty of time to get rid of all of them, and most of them don't need replacement policy. They don't need new statements. They don't need new positions. There's also something called the Reagan Rule, which was put in place by Ronald Reagan, that had to do with some of the funding, not all of it, that goes to Planned Parenthood. You can do that at the executive level as well. I mean, the Reagan Rule was challenged in court all the way to the Supreme Court, found to be constitutional. So these are actions he can take, creative actions he can take to make good on his promises. And I think that what is going to be for domestic policy, you've got obviously the immigration issues and the security of our border, but I also believe for the repeal of Obamacare in these first 100 days, I want to see from Congress, but a plan also that it's a comprehensive replacement. There you do need a replacement put forward by Congress to the president, working with his team, that all of at least the Republicans agree with, because for too long we're going to hear this pounding of there's been lots of replacement options put forward, Perry, but we need that one now. We need to all come together and have one that we agree with, along with the president. I think that's going to be very important. And then obviously on foreign policy, we need to let the generals, working, of course, with the president, who's the commander-in-chief, ultimately get to make those decisions on how to destroy ISIS and end this bloodshed in Syria, in Iraq, and of course, change our foreign policy as it comes to Israel, and start working on undoing the Iranian nuclear deal. That's another one, like the UN Security Council resolution, that will take time. There's steps the U.S. can take on its own, Perry, but a lot of that has to be done by convincing the world that came behind that, which were the most powerful countries in the world together, on why it should be abandoned. And Iran has violated it enough, I think, to even give legitimate grounds to get most of the world back on board with sanctions. But they're looking for the economic boom that comes to them from a deal like this.
Not to mention the deal with Russia that just happened with uranium over the last 24 hours.
Yeah, of course. I mean, so that's why he's got to, again, come in and flex muscles, make decide on those matters. What are most important? I think for most of us, those would be the two. Obviously, it's you've got ISIS must be destroyed. I mean, we're seeing even in Fort Lauderdale where there's this connection there. It's just hitting home too much. And of course, it's caused this unbelievable amount of loss of life in Syria and Iraq. So we've got to handle that, and they've got to come up with a comprehensive plan. on Israel. We need to just stand strongly with Israel, and that can be moving the embassy. He's picked a great ambassador to Israel, who's a strong supporter of Israel. Things are going to be very different in that relationship, I think, off the bat. And then, of course, with dealing with the real threat in that region, Iran, and the way that they have been tempting, I think, our troops into combat. We've seen those incidents that happened again over the weekend where a U.S. ship had to fire warning shots at an Iranian vessel. So that is right on the edge of a tipping point. I mean, he's coming in at a tough time. That's why I think I'll close, Perry, with you've got to understand the damages that have been done, especially not just to our own country domestically, but especially with our foreign policy. And some of these are not overnight, but in those first 100 days, you can start correcting them.
Well, Jordan, you and your organization, you guys are wonderful. Thank you for your time. We value it greatly, and look forward to some fun times ahead as we talk about all this and see what happens. And thank you for being the hawk that you and your dad and your organization is. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, go to aclj.org, support them, take a look at it. There's a lot going on there. Thanks, buddy. Talk again soon.
Thanks, Perry.
All right, God bless. We'll be right back.